The words that you see on the screen are all words that, well, I've been accused of. I've been accused of creating. I would say, to the extent that I have, the thanks are due to the handful, relatively small handful, of educators that fostered those characteristics in me. I think we all have to admit, this probably isn't your experience of the educational system. Is it your kids' experience? To the extent that we can get there, we can accomplish some magical things. And I'm going to argue that Renaissance is where we land. And that's the kind of world I want to live in. In fact, the precedent that I have for hacking this in the library is the Great Library at Alexandria. You go back several thousand years, actually before that, I should say, Maria, this may be as close as you and I get to Italy. You'll recognize the Raphael's masterpiece, which is actually in the Papal Palace, which is in the Vatican, which is kind of inside of Italy, but that's it. What is this? This was painted during the high part of the Renaissance, so in the 15th century. But what is it? I'm going to argue it's a depiction of the Great Library at Alexandria. Maybe not literally, but certainly metaphorically. What do you see when you look at this? You've got 50, maybe as many as 58 people actively engaged for the best and the brightest, from Aristotle and Plato. The model for Aristotle, by the way, was Leonardo da Vinci. You've got famous names here. You've got Euclid, who invented the geometry that is still taught today. He's teaching his kids. Where? In the library. And those kids appear to be engaged. They don't appear to be sitting back kind of bored. Over on the side, you've got Pythagoras, as in the Pythagorean theorem. You've got Hypatia, the female character up on top, who was the daughter of Theon, the last keeper of the Great Library at Alexandria, and a bona fide scholar and mathematician in her own right. They're mixing. And if this is the library, you don't see a heck of a lot of books there. Granted, the book as we know it 20 years ago, the Codex, was invented in the 15th century, but you don't see a lot of scrolls either. Now, there were a ton of scrolls in Alexandria. In fact, the Great Library was funded by Ptolemy the First through multiple generations. Alexandria was a harbor town, and in order to dock in the harbor, you had to surrender all of your scrolls. They were whisked off to the library where they were copied. The copies were returned to you. They kept the originals. We can't quite get there yet. But what you've got is you've got names like Archimedes, Hero, Hipparchus, who invented trigonometry. All of these things, these names are people that actually lived and worked across a time span of maybe a couple centuries, but in the Great Library at Alexandria, not in Athens, not in Rome, but in Alexandria, Egypt. This is where they created this new knowledge, and it's critical that you recognize that the primary thing that's going on there is conversation, because that's at the heart of it. The knowledge that Alexandria was charged with collecting, all of the world's knowledge, is as much in our own heads and the heads of the best and brightest as it is in any scroll. In fact, the scrolls in Alexandria were kept in the museum. Fast forward to the De La Mare Science and Engineering Library, which is housed in the Mackey School of Mines on the campus. They made the mistake of naming me to the head of that library in 2010. Beginning to discover the magnitude of that mistake. This is what the library looked like in 2010. You're looking at the sum total of the real estate within a 22,500 square foot building where you could actually talk with other people. The rest of it was book stacks with materials that were largely available electronically. But instead, the library continued to house, it's impolite to call it cordwood, but if it was being used electronically, that's the way that it was being housed. Well, we needed to get comfortable with what it means to be a library without those printed and bound books, because everyone knows it's online, right? It's all electronic, that's where it's going. What does it mean to be a library without the books? Well, you've got an archetype, the great library at Alexandria. That's what we need to be. We need to be getting this engagement, this activity, this conversation. How do you get there? How do you go from lonely, isolated, to active and engaged? Well, what we did is first we moved, by working closely with the Mathewson IGT Knowledge Center, we were able to migrate the bulk of the printed materials that were available electronically up into their 4-story robot. Great. If the apocalypse happens, we can recover them. That opened up 20,000 square feet, and we proceeded to start dumpster diving because we're all familiar with what the budget has looked like over the last several years. We were able to populate the 20,000 square feet with furniture that was repurposed from other buildings on campus, even around the county. The Washoe County School District actually donated a number of tables. We were able to triple the number of computers by using repurposed workstations, and we started doing things that the community needed. Might look like they're writing on the walls. You're absolutely right. In the sciences and engineering, you can run out of real estate on a whiteboard pretty easily, but you can't have enough. We actually added a couple thousand square feet and started using it. I'm here to argue that this is the magic that's going on. We've got, first and foremost, a great good place. If you're familiar with the work by Ray Oldenkamp, a great good place, well, what is that? It's subtitled cafes, coffee shops, a bunch of different things. A hangout at the heart of the community. We needed this library to become a hangout at the heart of the communities it served first. And that's what we're doing. Some characteristics of a great good place: everyone's on the same level. In this top picture, you'll notice that you've got faculty, you've got members of the local makerspace, you've got CEOs of local companies, you've got students. You can't really tell who's whom. That's the way it's supposed to be. Down here, again, you've got active engagement. Everyone has an equal voice. That's the conversation here. Another characteristic, in addition to, is that it's important that any of the events that you have are typically unscheduled. This is where we run screeching headlong into most traditional practice at libraries. They're unscheduled. They're largely unplanned. They are even, dare I say it, spontaneous. An example, Michio Kaku. My physicist geek is really sort of coming out here, but he's an astrophysicist. I mean, he's a rock star to me and to a number of the kids that use the library. He was giving a lecture on campus, and the dean happened to bring him by the library. Hey, presto, instant one-on-one for several hours with arguably one of the most famous people these kids are going to meet. You can't buy that. That's the kind of thing that encourages you to come back again and again. And when you're back, you're talking with folks. Another aspect that tends to be difficult for libraries to pull off is that it's playful. There has to be this sort of light sense of it. You'll notice up in the top corner, you've got a whiteboard competition. Yes, that is Cthulhu drawn in the side there, along with UFOs attacking. On the right-hand side, you've got the concrete canoe team, draws from across the College of Engineering. By the way, a shout out to them, just won the regional championship again. They're going to nationals. This is such their hangout that they've chosen to display their prized possession, the 2008 winning canoe, in the heart of the library. Yes, that's the score. That's what we're shooting for. They're also working hard. Some of the best and brightest kids, humans versus zombies. You got to be okay with that. That's cool. Other events that are spontaneous. Again, Bill Nye, the science guy, came to give a presentation. The kids came to us and said, we want to have a science fair. Let's have a science fair. We loaded up the 3D printer and hauled it off up to the student union. Some of the students, you'll see one of them brought his air cannon. Yikes. We're launching things across there. There's even an electric vehicle that was designed after one of the first atomic bombs ever used in warfare. We turned it into a reindeer because the kids wanted to decorate for Christmas. That's cool. I don't know how they knew I had a Santa suit, but again, the core of this, though, is the shared resources. This is what enables the library to take this far beyond what any cafe or coffee shop is going to do. Of course, libraries are all about shared resources. That's what they do. I'm here to argue that libraries have come a long way since Gutenberg invented the printing press. Our latest resource that we've added at the library in De La Mare is the 3D printing and scanning services. Makes perfect sense, right? If you're an engineering student, if you're a science student, if you're coming up with new ideas, imagine if you could take that idea, get it out of your head, and physically into something that's a 3D extended object. What could that do to your research, to your work? And in fact, that's exactly what we've been exploring. We added the 3D printing and scanning services about 8 months ago. These are all things that have been printed out. These are particular things that I've chosen because they've never existed before. They're brand new knowledge creation, each and every one of them at the heart of fundamental changes. This, an amazingly complex strand of DNA. A chemistry professor that had been working with his science, trying to get this molecule to do a particular thing, had been working for literally 3 years. Couldn't understand why it wasn't working. I printed out the molecule, he turned it over in his hand, and within 30 seconds I heard him say, "That's funny. I never realized it was that tight in there." In a flash, he realized all of that work was never going to pan out. Stop. Don't do that anymore. But at the same time, discovered an entirely different angle that he could take his research. He's off and running. That's what we need to be doing. The next slide here you've got is actually a paintball washing mechanism. Designed, created by a student who's not an engineering student, but he does work at a paintball company. He's applied for the patent. He's probably going to make plenty of money. That's the kind of problem we need our kids to be getting into. Similar sort of thing. A student who's half and half. He's a mechanical engineering student, major, and he's also a sculpture major, was able to realize his dream from high school of a board game. The last I heard, he was in the process of negotiating the sale of the rights to that game to a board manufacturer in the Middle East. Awesome, awesome stuff. And other things, more iPhone cases than you could shake a stick at. Yeah. I mean, again, they're all new things, but and we printed over 2,000 individual items just within the last 8 months. That's great. That's an adjunct. It's a resource that the library can bring to the table. Other resources that might be considered non-traditional: wireless AR drone quadricopters with a programming interface. You've heard about these a lot in the news lately. Well, what about our private rights? 2 years ago, kids using these resources from the library were designing and building systems. One of them, an example, would work perfectly in rural Nevada. The drone quadricopter that could wake up the farmer sitting at his table with the coffee cup, and it can fly around the 1,000-acre spread and figure out whether or not any of the animals are out there without the farmer having to get in his pickup truck and drive around all that real estate. The drone can go back to sleep until it starts again. Real things, real systems that these kids are coming up with. Also the SparkFun Arduino, I hurried up and got that off the screen before hopefully you noticed he made a DIY breathalyzer. Again, it's the kind of thing we want our kids to be doing. He's discovered things in a way that he would never otherwise. But our most important, our most powerful resource within the library that's shared are our community partners. You'll notice, again, recently we've hosted a number of hackathons in concert with the local co-working spaces, local maker spaces that have come on campus to offer classes and continue doing that. That street goes both ways. We're mixing back and forth because, you see, our kids that are going to university, they want to be what you are when they grow up. And the best way for us to teach them that is for you to come on campus and actually rub elbows with them and begin talking and begin doing things. That's what we want to be doing. In fact, at the latest hackathon, I recognized a couple of members that were there in this audience. I believe they created 39 apps in the Windows 8 store. So the next time you download a program, it could have come from there within 24 hours. This last slide is where you come in. This is where I come in, whether you call it catalyst. Okay, in chemistry, you'd say a catalyst is something that enables this process to happen. I've more often been called troublemaker, person that stirs the pot, who threw me under the bus, that kind of thing. That's my job. That's your job. To the extent that we can figure out what it is that you're really interested in and hook you up with the resources that the library provides, or connect you with the people that you need to talk to that you didn't even know existed. To the extent that we do that, we can create Renaissance. That's what we're doing. We are building the next generation of biggest little citizens. That's why this is an idea worth spreading. Thank you.